The NFL on CBS is back for another loaded Sunday. Week 8 gets rolling with Bears-Ravens, Fins-Falcons, Jets-Bengals, and the headliner in the afternoon, we got Cowboys at Broncos. But it's the uncertainty that surrounds Lamar Jackson and his status that has us extra intrigued for that 1 o'clock kick. The Ravens quarterback suited up for the first time in 24 days at practice this week, but his status for Sunday's game against the Bears is still up in the air as he works through that hamstring injury. Hopefully get some more clarity on this. We welcome in our Jonathan Jones, and the Ravens are coming off a bye, so he's really only missed 2 full games, but man, this team's got to win some football games. So what are you hearing on the likelihood of Lamar Jackson's return this weekend?
Yeah, it's been 3 weeks since that hamstring injury against the Kansas City Chiefs. Remember, of course, he never really looked right even in that game the week before. So there's been some question about whether it had been lingering up to that point. But Lamar Jackson was out there on the practice field on Wednesday, on the practice field on Thursday. As we speak right now, on the practice field for the Baltimore Ravens on Friday. The official injury report and the designation will come out later today. I can tell you that the Chicago Bears have been preparing as though Lamar Jackson will be playing this upcoming week. Now, that doesn't mean that, of course, he will, but there are certain signs that would lead you to believe that Lamar would make his return this weekend. Of course, we will know more as the weekend goes along, but certainly a positive sign, despite being limited in practice, that he has been out there in consecutive days as that continues, and so he could very well be making his return against the Bears, and that'd be huge for the Ravens. Of course, 1-5, their season certainly on life support. We do these hits when a team is 0-2, and we essentially say their season's over because they've started 0-2. Well, what happens when a team is 4 games below 500? What happens if they lose to the Bears and they go 5 games below 500? Emily, we would say that their season is absolutely kaput, but we see right here their schedule, a very tough slate early on. Until you get to the bye, those are teams that, outside of the Browns, a lot of people anticipated would constitute NFL playoff teams. Now things are starting to ease up a little bit, at least we think, right? The Bears, certainly formidable. You have the Dolphins on a short week. That's going to be a concern, certainly, with Lamar Jackson and his hamstring to be on the lookout for. And then, of course, the Vikings not looking as strong as we probably thought earlier in the season, the Browns again and the Jets. So it is possible, if there is a team, it's a team like the Ravens with Pro Bowlers, all pros throughout their roster. Unfortunately for them, of course, they've had any number of injuries to all of those guys. But if they are going to make a playoff push, it has to start this week. It has to start against the Chicago Bears, and certainly their odds would be much better, not with Cooper Rush, but with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, certainly based on the backup play we've seen, they need to get Lamar Jackson back. They are tied for their worst start in franchise history. Let's get to some other injury news before we talk trades. A.J. Brown and Nico Collins have been out of practice all week. Nick Sirianni didn't give us a status update and could potentially play even if he does not practice. So, JJ, how much concern is there for A.J. Brown's hamstring injury and his availability for Sunday?
Yeah, certainly some concern for the Philadelphia Eagles and A.J. Brown. They're going to practice this afternoon. Will ultimately get the injury designation again later today, but has not practiced. I do believe there is concern. There is a possibility that A.J. Brown would not play this upcoming week against the Giants for the Philadelphia Eagles. Meanwhile, Nico Collins dealing with a concussion. He hasn't practiced the first 2 days of this week, Wednesday and Thursday. Typically, when you're in the concussion protocol, you want to get a limited practice, then you can go to the next stage and it's a full practice, and then you get clearance from an independent doctor. Once you get to Friday, if you haven't had practice, it is usually extremely unlikely that you will be cleared. So the Texans certainly moving forward as though they will not have Nico Collins this week in their game.
Speaking of wide receivers, if we look ahead to the trade deadline on November 4th, the Broncos expect to be in the market for one. Where do you think they turn?
So you have to consider that Courtland Sutton, though he signed an extension, 30 years old. And this is a Broncos team that they have 5 wins right now. They have Bo Nix on a rookie contract at least through next year. He will be a very cheap player for them when it comes to bang for their buck. And so a lot of teams that I have spoken to have been pointing toward the Denver Broncos as a team to look out for at the wide receiver position. So that's a team. Look, when we talk about wide receivers, I know a lot of people immediately go to an A.J. Brown or a Jalen Waddle. I'm not talking about those guys. In fact, I'd be stunned beyond belief, Emily, if someone like Jalen Waddle wound up being traded. I want to make that extremely clear. However, folks are keeping an eye on the Broncos because they feel good right now, right? They got that win, the big Giants collapse. They want to keep the good times rolling, certainly. And so if they can get another wide receiver out there to help with Courtland Sutton, maybe beyond this year, of course, if they can lock into an extension, that would be something the Broncos would be interested in.
Yeah, Sean Payton asked about it this week, said they're probably not going to be active, but I think that's maybe for leverage. He absolutely has to say that. We do expect the Broncos to be in the market for a wide receiver. Also, another team in the market for a wideout, the Bills potentially. What do you think Buffalo will do at the deadline?
Yeah, potentially. And that's a team that I've had a couple of sources around the league say, watch out for Buffalo. Buffalo is an interesting one. 2 years ago, they made the deal at the trade deadline to get cornerback Rasul Douglas. Last year, they made a deal with the Cleveland Browns to bring in Amari Cooper. Kind of worked, kind of didn't, whatever. Now you have a Bills team that has their collection of draft picks. Obviously, I think now we have enough evidence to show that the Bills don't believe in championship windows. They believe that as long as they have Josh Allen, a healthy Josh Allen, they have an opportunity at a championship. So I don't see Brandon being the general manager there being desperate and giving up a second-round pick, for example, for a wide receiver. But could they make a deal for a receiver? I think it is certainly possible. Again, the Bills, it's been an up and down season for them. I think we all understand that. They have the Panthers, who will be playing at home. Not anticipating Bryce Young will be participating in that game for Carolina. But you have 2 weeks, a week and a half until the trade deadline. Could the Bills make a move for someone that ultimately would cost them a day 3 pick? That's what some folks around the league are keeping a close watch on, knowing that the Bills, the last couple of years, have been active for players at the deadline.
Yeah, you mentioned it the last couple of years. I feel like I just have to ask about the wide receiver position because it has been a position of need for them for the last few years. But once again, it is Super Bowl or bust for Buffalo. So maybe some moves will be made this year. We'll see. The Colts, currently the #1 team in the NFL, just as we all predicted. They have their sights set on that 1 seed, so they could potentially be buyers at the deadline. What positions do you think they could potentially add?
Well, I mean, obviously the offense is humming. We haven't seen an offense in Indianapolis look like this since Peyton Manning was there at quarterback. And so Daniel Jones on that 1-year contract. Jonathan Taylor readying for another contract extension probably this offseason. The offensive line looks great. It would be the defensive side, and particularly at edge rusher and at corner. Those are 2 spots that really a lot of teams are looking at. Really, you're talking about wide receiver, edge rusher, and corner for a large majority of teams. And so Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator, you could always use some depth. And they've had an injury, 2 concussions to Charvarius Ward. Of course, one earlier in the year, one just a couple of weeks ago during pregame warmups when he ran into a teammate. So they could use some help, certainly, at corner. I would look at the Colts, a team that has not usually been super aggressive at the trade deadline under Chris Ballard. Now they're 6-1. Maybe they see an opening. Maybe they make a move here. It has been quiet the last 2 weeks, Emily. We have not sat here on CBS Sports HQ and talked about an NFL trade that has actually occurred in 2 weeks. Why is that? Because every team wants to be a buyer and no team wants to be a seller. No one wants to be honest about where they are in this NFL life. But things are going to continue to shake out. Teams will win, teams will lose. Losing teams will continue to lose, and maybe their asking prices will start going down and becoming a little bit more realistic just ahead of the November 4th trade deadline.
Yeah, that's why fans aren't making these trades. But if we talk about perception, not among the fans, but within the league, do people actually view the Colts as a serious Super Bowl contender?
Well, I think so, only because who's stopping that offense? We haven't seen it really to be stopped yet. Now, look, I know a lot of folks, especially folks who are Giants fans perhaps, are waiting for Daniel Jones to turn into a pumpkin. I'll just say this about Daniel Jones. The first couple of games of the season, we were looking at the Colts and saying, all right, that's nice. Let's see them against some actual competition. And they went up against some actual competition and held up and continued to win. I mean, look, is this going to last? If they are 7 games into what they hope to be a 21 or so game season, then they're just a third of the way through. Can we guarantee that that is going to continue for the final 2/3 of the season for the Colts? No, of course not. But Jonathan Taylor is on a tier with only really Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson to some extent, last week notwithstanding, as far as running backs go. Daniel Jones in the lead probably for comeback player of the year so far, considering how he was cast off there in New York. And so, again, great times in Indy. Can it continue? Will they have doubters? Will they potentially be underdogs when and use that as fuel and bulletin board material in games that otherwise they shouldn't be? Perhaps. But, you know, the Colts haven't proved it in many years. Now it's their time to do so.
Yeah, they've earned that skepticism. Still need to earn that belief. Jonathan Jones, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. We appreciate it. Keep it rolling here on HQ. Who is in and who's out? The CFP bracket is starting to take some shape. And our friends at Sportsline give us some juicy matchups and teams who just missed the cut. Stay with us here on HQ.